welcome. It has been a somber few days as we learn the news about 2 more Iowans lost overseas. These Iowa soldiers killed in Kuwait followed 2 Iowa National Guardsmen killed in Syria just a few months ago. Iowans have given so much. They have sacrificed so much. I grieve for their families. Our entire caucus grieves for their families, and I hope for the safe return of all their fellow servicemen in harm's way.
Iowa House Democrats echo those condolences with Major O'Brien, who's from Waukee, and Sergeant Coady of West Des Moines. Terrible tragedies that should have never happened. And our thoughts and prayers are with the family and the families that were affected. And on a different note, we had a very active week, as many of you know, in the Iowa House. None of it focused on important issues like lowering costs and clean water. Yeah, in fact, the reason that Dr. Baeth is here with me today is to talk a little bit more about the differences between the Iowa House Republicans and Iowa House Democrats. A lot of what they do is window dressing and really not something that is going to affect everyday Iowans, and what Dr. Baeth did with his proposals would actually change the way things like school children drinking nitrate-filled water which they rejected. So if it's okay, I'll turn it over to Dr. Baeth. Grief, Brian. I'll turn it over to Dr. Baeth. I knocked this off. Whose is that?
You can just set it there.
Right, thanks. I'll turn it over to Dr. Baeth to talk about our proposals.
Good morning. This week's so-called MAHA bill in the Iowa House really missed the mark. And it's something that I'm really regretful to say, because this was an opportunity in a time when Iowa has a cancer crisis on our hands. This was an opportunity for our state government to come together on behalf of all of Iowans and do something about it. And so I was excited to see that the governor had proposed some legislation for wide sweeping changes to make Iowans healthier, and then when we saw the actual language, we see that it does anything but. We saw legislation that makes ivermectin over the counter, and along with that gives legal and licensing immunity to pharmacists who dispense it. The only drug that I know of that gives legal and licensing immunity to dispense, probably because ivermectin is not safe enough to be over the counter, and because it has no use for people unless they have roundworm. And so this is something that I think, if anything, cheapens the seriousness of our need for actual health policy changes in our state. And the ivermectin bill, instead of using science to make Iowans healthier, uses folklore. Ivermectin is today's bloodletting and leeches of yesterday. Iowa House Democrats, instead, I want to get to actually one more thing that was very concerning to me, and that was on the matter of school nutrition. I think everybody acknowledges that the food in our schools could be healthier. There are too many processed foods. And so there was some reasonable legislation that was originally proposed that would take out dyes that are typically found in those processed foods. But that tiny seed of possibly good nutrition legislation was then poisoned by a bill for Iowa to strike out on its own to get rid of all science-based dietary recommendations, and this was with the Wolf Amendment, to then prioritize meat, dairy, vegetables, fruit, and then to ask for an exemption from federal regulations for limits on sodium and for recommendations that kids get whole grains in their diet, which is a very important component of a diet which reduces risks of cancer and heart disease. So what we House Democrats propose is, okay, if you're going to try to make Iowa's school food healthier, Let's make the water healthier in Iowa schools. And let's ensure that schools have the tools, the resources to provide clean, healthy drinking water to our children. And that means drinking water with low nitrate levels, as opposed to the higher ones that are coming out of our taps, which science has linked to various cancers. And we were all very disappointed to see every single Republican in the Iowa House vote against providing healthy water to our school children. It's disappointing, it's a missed opportunity, and I hope that all of our lawmakers continue to hear from Iowans and their concern that we do actual, real, science-based legislation to make everyone healthier.
On that bill, it originally had the governor's proposal for increase in the tobacco tax, and I don't know if one of the leaders wants to handle this or you, Representative Baeth, but I'm wondering if you're hearing, obviously that was taken out of that bill, and I know that in the Senate as well, there's a proposal, but I don't believe it's moved forward. Are you hearing anything about a willingness among Republicans to raise the tobacco tax?
Yeah. I think in the House there's bipartisan support for that, but I think they simply don't have the votes to do it right now. And of course, the way they operate is they're not going to bring something to the floor unless they have strong Republican support. But if it were to come to the floor, there would be virtually all Democrats voting for it. So.
I believe that it failed in HHS subcommittee or HHS committee, so we would be dependent at this point, unless they choose to add it as a fiscal bill later on. We'd be dependent on a bill coming over from the House. But we know that it would have a proven effect in lowering use of tobacco and vaping products.
So is your caucus in the Senate mostly for it? Have you talked about
We
it?
actually haven't discussed it, but basically we would like to do something positive to address our high cancer rates. And if we do nothing, we're probably gonna end up as first in the nation within 10 years.
Senator Weiner, there was a bill, a subcommittee hearing this week on a bill that would add a premium tax on health insurance plans, and at this subcommittee hearing, Wellmark's lobbyists testified that it would amount to a $230 million tax increase, $50 million in an increase just on their company and their members. Governor Reynolds just told us that that's not true and they're misunderstanding the bill, using wrong numbers, something to that effect. Has your staff had a chance to analyze that bill? What's your understanding of that provision?
Yes, we've looked at the bill. I couldn't tell you what the exact percentage of tax increase would be, but what it is an attempt to help them dig out of the budget hole they've dug on the backs of Iowans. Because if you increase the taxes on insurance companies, those are gonna flow down to Iowans, and Iowans are going to pay the price. In addition, the majority party is trying to say this is because of provisions in the big beautiful bill. Actually, we already have our own $1.2 billion budget deficit, and the majority party needs to take responsibility for that and not have regular Iowans, working Iowans, pay for it.
The governor also addressed the ongoing conflict in Iran and the death of the soldiers, including 2 from central Iowa. She's asked about preparing the state for the possibility of future deaths as this conflict goes on, and said that she's supportive of the mission and supportive of the Trump administration's handling of the conflict. Just wondering if you have any comments on, to family members of Iowans who are overseas right now who may be feeling fear or uncertainty, or if you have any response to the governor's thoughts on the conflict.
I mean, it's incredibly important that we all support the families of our soldiers who are deployed overseas. It is a very difficult moment. We've seen Iowa's already paid a disproportionately high price between what happened in Syria and what's already happened with the 2 soldiers lost in Kuwait. So whatever happens, and whatever any of us personally think about this conflict, it's essential that we be there to support them. Senator Blake, in a point of personal privilege on the floor yesterday, spoke about being himself deployed to Iraq when his son was a year old, and how Kuwait was supposed to be the safe space, that when he was in Iraq, his wife prayed every day for him when he was in Kuwait, they breathed a sigh of relief. I don't think any Iowa families are gonna breathe a sigh of relief until all our soldiers are home.
And I would say that obviously we are very supportive of those soldiers that are in harm's way. But again, it goes to forever wars. What's the end game? What are we doing? And you know, nobody can explain it to me. There's been different rationales, different explanations. You know, 6 months ago we obliterated the nuclear program, and that was the first initial conversation and explanation. But this is nothing more than another forever war, and it's very unfortunate. And obviously, we are very supportive of Iowa's soldiers and the families that are in harm's way.
I'd like to add one more thing, and that is that our soldiers are indeed in harm's way, but they're not the only Iowans who are in the Middle East. There are large numbers of U.S. nationals, presumably among them many Iowans, as many as 1 million in that whole area. It's the job of the U.S. State Department to ensure that they find a safe way out of that area of conflict and home. We have some embassies that are closed now. I was happy to see that the State Department is finally saying, instead of saying, oh no, we can't help, they're finally stepping up and saying, we will work to help get you home. So we need to be there for those Iowans as well.
Representative Meyer, you, I believe, voted for the 3 strikes bill yesterday that was debated in the House. There were some concerns from your caucus about a disproportionate impact on Black Iowans, about costs and need for building another prison. Can you talk about your vote?
Yeah, well, so the vote was very simply that I have those same concerns, and it was not an easy vote, but I'll tell you this, that the bill improved dramatically with the amendment, and I think that we had a lot of members of our caucus that voted for it, wanted to vote for it, and voted for it, and the caucus was in different positions on it, had different positions on it, but I felt it was important that we take a look at the fact that the bill was significantly improved, and that we were able to have conversations with the Republicans to say, hey, this is the consequences of this bill in terms of a disparate impact, and it dramatically improved.
So was that the result of Democrats negotiating for those things with Republicans? Is that what you're saying, or am I misunderstanding you?
Well, I think it was a direct result of Democrats having conversations with Republicans about it, and making the bill better than what it was when it was first released. And so, you know, we did have an influence on that. They may disagree, but we did have conversations, and I think a lot of the movement was because of the conversations we were having. We do still have concerns, obviously, of the disparate impact on minorities. We also have concerns about the fact is that prisons are overpopulated by 24% is the recent number that I saw. I think that was a misstatement on the floor by the Republicans, and I think that it's a situation where we'll see if the Senate takes it up, because it's a very expensive bill, but you know, every member has to weigh the benefits and the negative aspects of any single bill, and I think because they move so dramatically in a different direction is why I got some support in our caucus.
Related to the cost on that bill, Representative Holt made some fairly extraordinary comments about the Department of Corrections, accusing them of providing information that inflated the cost so that the fiscal note would be higher. Do you have confidence in the accuracy of the fiscal note estimates on the cost, or do you think that maybe those might be a little inflated?
No, I mean, all I can do is take the word of the professionals. And so, you know, the reason we made the procedural move that we did was because we did not feel, based on the changes in the bill, we had accurate information on the criminal justice impact of the cost and the disparate impact on minorities. And so the reason we made that motion to defer was simply, let's take a step back and see how this is going to affect the populations in the prisons and everything else. And so the real question is whether the Senate's going to take this up, because I have not heard any of that. It's also very performative because, you know, at the beginning of the year, Representative Grassley made it very clear that this was a political issue for them. Iowa's crime rate is at an all-time low, and the question is, you know, was this necessary? Was it needed? And at this point, it's unclear.
There were, I know you mentioned, it was a really busy week in the Iowa House. There were a lot of things that did make it to the floor, but there were also several bills that got pulled. I don't know if they're waiting on amendments or if they didn't have enough support, but I was wondering if you had any comments on that, but also any updates on where things potentially stand on like the abortion pill bill, the local civil rights commissions, the Charlie Kirk bill, school violence, all of those were on the calendar but didn't end up making it this week.
Well, you'll have to ask them. I mean, I know the information that I'm provided, but I also I've been around for 20 years in this place, and I can tell when something's getting messy. And I think the abortion pill bill is getting messy for them because of Deacon's amendment. And I think that we, as Iowa House Democrats, are more than happy to have a vote on that. Let's put it to a vote. And you know, let's see where everybody's at on. The reality is, it's not talked about. It's not talked about part of the bill. The reality is that yes, you can charge a doctor for murder, a Class A felony, but also you can charge a woman for murder. That's the reality of that bill. That is a Class A felony bill for a doctor and a woman that perform abortion in the state of Iowa, and the Iowa House Democrats are more than willing to have that vote. And I think that's why things are getting messy, is because you have different factions of the Republican caucus that want to go into very extreme land, the extreme parts of their world to do these social issues, and then you have people that are just more wanting to, you know, do a budget and go home. So the reality is that they're having problems within their caucus. You have to ask them about why some of these bills are not coming up.
Senator Weiner, I missed last week, so maybe you talked about this then, but there's been a few bills, I think they're mostly in the Senate, that Democrats have argued are an attempt to sort of hamstring the next governor before they take office. I'm just wondering if you could speak to those generally, or if there's any one of them you'd like to speak more on. But there's the continuing budget one, which was pulled from the debate. I don't know if you have any update on that. The appointments and rulemaking, the codifying of MCOs, stuff like that.
We should be doing our job for Iowans. And I think I mentioned something about this last week. We did indeed have the continuing budget amendment, continuing budget bill that was supposed to come to the floor and was pulled. I take that to mean, although you'll have to ask the majority party, that there's not sufficient support in their caucus for that. And I think that's because they realize that Iowans expect us to do our jobs. They expect us to do a budget. We have never not done a budget. In a couple of cases, there have been individual continuing resolutions put in to make sure that a governor had enough time to sign when they were running up against the deadline, but that's literally our job. And it's not acceptable to say, oh, guess what, I'm not interested in working in a bipartisan manner in the event that a Democrat becomes the next governor. That's what Iowans want us to do. And any attempt to evade that responsibility is not what Iowans are looking for.
And I guess because they push back on that suggestion that it has anything to do with the next governor possibly being a Democrat. What's your sense of these bills?
They can say whatever they want. It's pretty clear to us.
Representative Baeth, you have a moment. Would you mind just giving a summary of what your amendment would have done in terms of, you know, with the nitrate levels in waters and with schools? I know there are a lot of parents out there, and just families in general, that are getting maybe mixed messaging on whether our water is safe or not with the nitrate removal system that's been having to run this, you know, winter and early spring. What would that bill have done, or amendment?
We have evidence that nitrate levels as low as 3 milligrams per liter may be linked to cancer. It's not definite, and that's why I think in part we haven't seen action by the EPA to lower their recommendation for nitrate limit. This is relatively new research. But whenever I talk about cancer, whether it's among experts in the field of medicine and cancer and public health, or on social media and hear from Iowans who are watching, everybody's gut is telling them that the root of Iowa's cancer crisis is in our environment. We don't really have another obvious explanation. Is it our water? Is it our air? Is it a combination? And nitrate may, if anything, even just be a surrogate marker for other pollutants in our water that may be contributing to our cancer rate. And so what I think is really important is that we protect our kids with solutions that so many Iowans have already opened up their pocketbook for, which is to buy a reverse osmosis system or to buy bottled water. That's not always a tenable solution for a lot of families. It would be much more efficient if we think upstream and prevent a lot of those pollutants from going in. But at least as a short-term gap, a short-term bridge, we offered the state funding, $10 million, which is about the price of 2 of the governor's Cessnas, to provide safe, healthy drinking water to our kids. We don't think that's a whole lot to ask. And if anything, we really just want to highlight the issue that water quality is a concern of the overwhelming majority of Iowans, and we want to see who wants to come up to the table and look for solutions to it. And we got our answer on that vote. There wasn't a single Republican who hit the green button. I would have been open to a secondary amendment to how they wanted to exactly implement this plan, but there is no interest in even acknowledging that we have a water problem. That's what's really concerning.
There's a radon mitigation bill. I know that in the past you've worked with Representative Wills on some of these cancer-related bills. What do you expect? Are there other bills in that vein that you expect to come to the House floor?
That radon bill is on the calendar for Monday again. What I have heard is that some Republicans have been reticent to mandate that home builders install radon-resistant new home construction, despite the fact that just a year ago we passed it through the House, I believe unanimously. So I'm not sure exactly what has changed. I will say that if there's any state in the nation to have a requirement like this, it's Iowa. And I've seen far too many cases of young people with lung cancer who are non-smokers, and the statistics would say it's from radon. And this is something that should in no way be partisan and something that we should all rally around to support. So I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing that actually get a vote on Monday. There are a lot of other things we can do around radon that we actually passed through the House last year, which it's at the desk of the Senate Majority Leader to act on.
On that, there's also a tanning bed bill that would put restrictions for minors using those. I know that you might have worked on that last year, at least around a sub. Do you know where that one stands? I understand it made it out of subcommittee at least this year.
Senate side, did you have some?
There was a bill, but it hasn't, I don't think it's gone anywhere.
But yeah, given that advancing this year, do you think the Republican caucus is more ready to take that up this year, especially since Iowa does have high rates of skin cancer that are similar to states in the Sun Belt?
I would hope so. I've seen a little bit of hypocrisy in terms of parental rights and legislation around protecting kids. This is something that for sure would protect our children, and so I would like to see them be consistent with that and pass common sense legislation that prevents our children from being irradiated and by many-fold increasing the chances of melanoma. So I'm hoping that we'll see that and join several other states, and join 44 other states that have restrictions on tanning beds for minors.
Any last questions, folks? We're gonna end it there so we can get back down to the